me to put something together through Hallie Simpson, the incredible Hallie Simpson, with this series. Oh, actually, Hallie reached out and said, "Hey, could you do something on, brainstorm things that people might not be aware of that they're capable of?" And she knows that I've done quite a bit of brainstorming in my broadcast career. So when I was putting this together and mind mapping it, I was like, there's some pretty good examples that I could use of people who have pivoted and found a new a superpower. So half of this is going to be digital, half of it's going to be more traditional examples of people who have pivoted and gone on to do things that they probably wouldn't have done maybe 10 years ago. And I've got some special guests on too that are going to explain their journey and how they got to where they are and what they're doing now in that new superpower. So let me share the screen. Lexi, let me make sure I get this right. What do you see?
We see the entire, we see all of your slides on the side. So you just want to make sure you hit that from beginning.
Yep, got it. Are we cooking with gas?
We can see go to the display settings.
Okay. Oh, you said this yesterday.
And then, yep. There you go.
Boy, old dogs take a long time to learn.
No, you're good.
There's superpowers hidden inside of all of us, and sometimes we have a blind spot and we can't see it, and sometimes we need other people to uncover it, and that's why a lot of times you need a coach, somebody to say, hey, you don't know this, but you have this certain superpower that I think you could excel at. We're going to uncover some later, and please stick around, because before we ask questions, I'm going to ask you, everybody in the room, one question individually. So please hang on for the next 40 minutes or so. Your superpower might be on the internet. A lot of people's superpower have been discovered on the internet. And here's a few examples. The Biebs, Justin, he was discovered on the internet by Scooter Braun and then introduced to Usher, and the rest is history. Kate Hudson was discovered on the internet. She was doing the Dougie at a Lakers game in 2011 and went on to a supermodel career. But I want to know what's up with this. What are you doing on the internet? This woman has 2.3 million followers, eating food. Her name is Bethany Gadsden. Each time she eats food on the internet, she gets about 17,000 views. So maybe that's your superpower, but let's stop doing that, okay? How about becoming a writer? Everybody on this call is a writer. If you put a word on a screen, you're a writer. A lot of people are intimidated by, well, I've got this idea for a screenplay or a novel, but gosh, how do I get there? Well, you start with one word at a time. So if you've done a LinkedIn post, a Facebook post, or a tweet, you're a writer. Maybe you have an idea for a novel or a novella. Maybe it's only 70 pages and not 300. But if you're passionate about your story, you could write a novel in about 30 days if you do 10 pages a day. If that's 5 pages a day, it's 60 days. And then you go into the editing process and so on and so forth. And just so you know that I'm in the game too, I've been working on this treatment of a kid's book for, well, this is 2 pages of 15 pages of the treatment, and I'm guilty too of not following through. I make the mistake of I don't have the time. The treatment is completely done. I just need to write the story. And a lot of us are scared because when you put something out there, I write a column every Monday, about 300 words, about 3 minutes, you can read it. It's called the Robinson Report. But a lot of people are afraid of the creative because all of a sudden you have your stuff out there and people are going to judge it. That's what you're thinking in your head. Get past that. And when I write 1, 2, 3 pages at a time and then go back and edit it. I don't write a sentence and edit it or a paragraph and edit it. Just put your fingers to the keyboard and start writing. Just do it. Here's a good example. My friend Kent Stirling. Kent's on the call. Kent is one of the most, in my mind, one of the most passionate people I ever met about sports. He does a daily vlog, a video blog on Facebook. So write this down. Follow Kent on Facebook. He's passionate about local and national sports. He does sports and nothing but sports, as he'll tell you. So when Kent decided to write a book, you think, you know, this guy who has so much deep knowledge of sports, perhaps he's going to write a book on sports. I ran into Kent first in St. Louis, and now we're both back in Indy. But Kent has been around the Indianapolis radio scene for much more than a decade. He's been on the air. He's been a program director. He's won awards, and he's on the call with us. So you think maybe Kent's going to write a great book about the Chicago Cubs, which he's so passionate about. But no, he wrote a book about all the dumb things he's done in his life. It's called Oops, The Art of Learning from Mistakes and Adventures. And he's self-published too. And it's pretty good. It's a good read. It's he capsulizes each chapter in about 2 to 3 pages, and then does bullet points after that on all the things he learned from that particular chapter and that particular blunder. So Ken, welcome to the call. Tell us, how did you get to write this book, and tell us the path to self-publishing?
Well, you kind of hit on it. Whatever you want to do, you've got to do it. You know, when I was in Chicago back in the early 90s, I worked in improvisational theater. And one of the directors I worked with was a guy named Mick Napier, who runs the Annoyance Theater. And I said, okay, when I audition, what do I need to do to get somebody's attention? And he said, please just do something. Do anything. People who try not to make mistakes, they never get hired for anything. At least if you do something, maybe you're going to entertain the people who are evaluating. So it was always do something. And that rang in my head. You know, whatever you do today, make it active and do things. And so when you've got the thing up there, but I've got the book in my hand also. And what I decided to do was, there, you've got your copy.
It's not signed. You know what? It's not signed, and I'll remember that too.
I'm going to sit and I'm going to write, and I'm going to figure it out later. You know, it doesn't have to be something I'm going to publish. I like writing, and so at kentstirling.com, I write every day too. But I started writing every day, tried to write a chapter. Not necessarily every day, but when something occurred to me, some kind of life lesson or some kind of mistake I made that led to me learning, that was impactful in my life, I decided to write it. If for no other reason, to, you know, make sure at some point it was available for future generations of Stirlings to read, because you know what, I would like for 4 generations from now, people to have some kind of an idea of where they came from. So that was kind of the theory behind the beginning of the writing. And then as I wrote, writing is kind of like this. It's kind of like having a big lump of clay. And then you start to shape it. And the editing is really kind of the important thing. And I worked with some people who had written a book, and they helped me sort of shape it. But it's just sitting down and, like, if you want to learn to play the guitar, you can, in your head, think, okay, I want to learn to play the guitar. But until you pick up the guitar and start figuring out chords and start strumming, it ain't going to work. You know what I mean? You can't do it in theory. You can't hope to learn or hope to write. You just have to do it. So do it. I mean, all of you who are on this call are motivated somehow or another to live your life through activity. And that's how you've achieved the success that you have in your professional careers. You need to apply those same strategies towards something like writing, so that ultimately you start generating some kind of product.
Tell me your path to self-publishing.
Oh, wow. Well, that was kind of easy. It costs about $7,000 to have somebody publish your book. And it costs about, to get the text formatted correctly and the cover designed and all that stuff, it costs about $2,000 to self-publish. So in this way, what I told the guy who I talked to about publishing the book is that, you know, this is a book about mistakes, but I don't want my biggest mistake to be using you as the publisher, and all of a sudden I got to dig $5,000 out of my pocket that I'm going to lose in this process. So it was really an economic choice. And working with, being in media, I know people who've self-published, and so they were able to steer me in the right direction for the cover design and for the text design. But once you've got that done, it's very, very easy to, buy your barcode, buy your IC, what is it? The ISBN code that you need, and that kind of thing. And that becomes a process that's very similar to writing, in that you learn a little bit every day, and you become a little bit more educated as a self-publisher every day. It's a little bit complicated, and it takes a little bit to kind of get geared up into how it works. But really, the genesis of my deciding to self-publish was entirely economic. I just didn't want to pay more to have some guy do it for me than for me to do it myself.
That headshot has a funny story behind it.
Yeah,
and it's
that
in the
was
book.
fake.
It's in the book. Give me 90 seconds on that.
So we're in St. Louis, and the company that both Kevin and I worked for, Hubbard, they did it right. And they brought a professional makeup person and hair person in with a professional photographer to take headshots. And so they brought me over, and I'd seen other guys do it, professional athletes do it, and I thought, okay, what the hell? I'll go ahead and play along. So I closed my eyes, and they were plucking eyebrows and spray tanning and all this stuff, and it made me really, really nervous. And so they took the pictures, and I had to run right from the conference room where the pictures were taken into a meeting with the CFO for Hubbard and another high muckety muck for Hubbard. And so I'm in there, and I'm pitching the station. I'm saying, here's what we're going to do on 101 ESPN. We're going to win this way and that way. And about halfway through, I thought, oh my God, I've got all this spray tan on. I've got eyeliner on. Do I look like me, or do I look like Jim J. Bullock as the center square in Hollywood Squares? What kind of a human being do I look like? So I kind of wrapped things up. I went to the bathroom, and it was as horrible as I had imagined. My face was orange. The eyeliner was really peculiar looking, and I had to run. I scrubbed it all off, and I went back into the conference room. As Kevin, you might have been meeting with him at that point. I was like, hey, fellas, I just want to let you know, I'm not the kind of guy who runs around with a bunch of eyeliner and spray tan and has my hair just so I don't know what kind of a first impression I made, but this is kind of who I am. And they all laughed, and it was kind of a good way to get to know those guys.
And we can contact you at kentstirling.com?
Absolutely, always. Or follow me on Twitter or friend me on Facebook, easy.
Thanks for being on, Kent. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Next up is my friend Bill Cleveland. Bill is a fellow longtime radio geek like me. He evolved himself from doing radio early in his career to writing comedy. He still writes comedy for a show, if not several shows. Really funny guy, dry wit. I believe he's a nationally ranked pickleball player. He can speak to that, but he's really into pickleball. And what Bill did was he started, because he has a passion for travel and especially smaller stories within smaller towns all across the Midwest and beyond. So with his own money, he started going to these companies, contacting the Chamber of Commerce, and say, hey, tell me the story about Effingham, Illinois. He's even done one on Indy, which is really good. And you can find that, I believe, on his YouTube channel. So this evolved into him getting involved in different writing associations. And he's written 2 books now. This is the first one that really put him on the map when it comes to writing. He did quite an extensive book tour. And remember, he did this all himself with his own money. And he just finished his 3rd book, and maybe you can talk a little bit about that. He's on the call too. Bill, good morning.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
We got you. Lima Charlie, you're ready to go.
My very first Zoom experience, so this is very exciting. And I have to just say real quick, I don't know anything about what's going on, but this gal, her name is Katie Moore. She hasn't stopped smiling for the last 20 minutes, so I don't know what's going on over at her house, but probably more exciting than what's going on over here. So you just kind of want my backstory? Is that kind of what we're doing here?
Yeah. How did you pivot and find the superpower of travel writer? And then give us maybe 2 minutes on your journey to publishing, because you are not self-published. You have a publisher, correct?
Yeah, that is correct. I have a publisher, and I was listening to Kent, and I just thought, wow, we could not be more in the opposite direction. If I made mistakes, my editor would send me back, red marks all over the place. So I have to be as close to perfect as I possibly can be when I'm doing my stuff. Um, anyway, yeah, so I started travel writing in 2013. It actually resulted from, I wasn't fired from a job, but I was demoted, and so I decided to start a website called BillOnTheRoad.com, just looking for something new to do, and didn't really have any direction. All I knew is that I liked telling stories, as you mentioned, and so started doing these little vignettes, I guess you could say, little video stories about different people, places, and things. And then quickly realized that I needed to focus on one of those. And so I decided to pick places and started focusing around the St. Louis area where I live, and then started branching out a little farther. And then realized that, oh my gosh, there are people who actually get paid to do this. There are actually people who are called travel writers, travel journalists. And so I started making connections, and long story short, I now travel all over the United States and do stories about people and places all across America, and promoting road trips across the country. And so it has been, I would never, I didn't even like to drive, honest to God. And, I didn't get a driver's license until like 19 years old. And now here I am driving all over America. So I never would have imagined that this was the path that I would take. And so, yeah, you mentioned I did a book called 100 Things to Do in America Before You Die. That was the first book. I wrote a book called Driving Across America last year, and I just literally last night finished my third book. It'll be called Touring the American Dream, and that'll be out in the fall. And so, yeah, it's been a wonderful experience. I'm on a handful of radio stations around the country, XM satellite radio. I've written for the Los Angeles Times, other newspaper outlets or whatever. And so, yeah, it's been great. You mentioned the pivot. I know that was your kind of focus here. And I would just say that whether it's, for me, it was travel writing, but, when you wind up in a situation where people say, one door closes and another one opens, when you hear that, the first thing you think is, oh, that is a giant load of crap. Like that can't possibly be true. But turns out, what do you know? It is true. And for me, I'm a living example of that. And so, yeah, but yeah, BillOnTheRoad.com is the website. And I don't know if you have any other questions. Sorry.
How did you get the attention of a publisher?
So this is kind of funny. So I actually had a publisher contact me, which that never happens for starters. And they asked me to write a book on Route 66. And so instead of being, a smart writer, I said, no, I'm not really interested in that. And so after I hung up the phone, I thought, boy, that was probably a pretty stupid thing. So I called them back and I said, I really have no interest in writing about Route 66, but I knew that this company had this line of books, the 100 Things books. And I knew they had done, you're in Indianapolis, so I know they have 100 Things to Do in Indianapolis and in Kansas City and St. Louis. They have probably 100 versions of this. And I said, what about 100 Things to Do in America? And the publisher actually said, I don't think that's going to work. That's too broad. It's whatever. Well, anyway, ends up, it's like one of their best-selling books that they have now. So thankfully, they went ahead and did it. So for me, yeah, that's how that worked. And then, yeah, it's just, it's building good relationships. I turn everything in on time, try to make it as easy as possible on them. And they continue to offer me new projects. So that's good.
And you had a hiccup when the warehouse where they had all your books burned.
Yeah, November 2017, there was a giant warehouse fire in the St. Louis area. And just a quick funny story, I was actually in this room, and I was scheduled to go to Indianapolis actually for a book signing. And the warehouse is located in St. Louis where all the books are. And I called them and I said, hey, I need to pick up some books for this event. And they said, well, maybe later this afternoon, we actually have the fire department is here. There's like a small fire somewhere in the building. Can you just come back? Oh, yeah, sure. So I turn around and on television, I'm watching the news, and all of a sudden the helicopters are flying over this giant building downtown. And I text message a friend of mine who worked for the local TV station. I said, that you're doing a story at this warehouse. I said, boy, it looks an awful lot like the place where they're storing my books. And so turns out it was the place where they were storing my books, and the whole warehouse went like 4 acres of warehouse up in flames, and my books were in there. And so yeah, that made for a lot of. Thankfully, I had a couple of cases left before they were able to reprint them. But yeah, that's a horrible memory. Thanks for bringing that up. Appreciate that.
Well, thanks for sharing your story, Bill. BillOnTheRoad.com. You can be entertained for hours, not only reading his stories, but looking at his videos that he's put together. Very good. Thanks for jumping on, Bill.
Thanks for having me. Nice to see you all.
Bye-bye. You can stay on, by the way, because the best is yet to come. I know you will probably think that you were the top of the iceberg, but no, we're only halfway through. We 2 examples there of radio people who pivoted and did something outside of their comfort zone and found a superpower beyond radio. Let's talk about audio creation. Other people that come the other way. You may want to do a blog or a podcast or a video blog. And you might think, well, how do I do that? I mean, that sounds hard to me, especially if you've never touched audio at all. It's actually very simple. And I'll give you an example. Most people think that you need this to be a podcaster or to start a voiceover business. No. I'll show you my home office. You ready to be awed? That's my home office right there. And that is my microphone. That's it. A couple throw pillows in front of my microphone to deaden the sound, and that's all you need. And you might think, well, what do I do about editing? How do I put it in my computer? What happens? Well, that's an MXL USB mic. You just plug it into your computer. It finds your audio software if you have it on your computer, and boom, you can start recording. Well, how do I get it to sound good? There is a free editing software package out there called Audacity. And if you can cut and paste text, you can cut and paste audio and video. It's very simple to use. If you want to go into the space on the fly and really kind of become a rookie in podcasting, let me know. I will help you get there. I do podcasting coaching, but it's not my main wheelhouse. All the people that I do are existing clients, and then we do podcasting. So we have an expert on coming up next that is probably more suited to coach you into the podcasting world, because I just deal with my clients and coach them through podcasting. But you might say, well, so what? You can put your voice down and edit it and make it sound like a podcast. Well, with Audacity and that little bitty microphone, you can actually create imaging for a radio station. This is a radio station in Marquette, Michigan that we put on about 6 weeks ago, 106.1 The Sound. If you listen to that radio station, all of that audio came from this microphone, all of it, the entire radio station. So you don't have to have an over-the-top setup to really make it sing. Our next guest is Jen Eads, and Jen has had a number of things. She's been in corporate management, a general manager for an outfit. She did some inside sales. She's a vocalist and guitarist for a band. She's an accomplished musician. And about 5 or 6 years ago, she started podcasting and formed a company called Brassy Broadcast Company. And she did a ton of podcasts. They're very entertaining. She's coached a bunch of podcasts, and now she's doing that full time. And she's on with us now. She is doing a new podcast, fairly new podcast called Beauty and the G, gripping conversations about jiu-jitsu and life. Jen, welcome to the call.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Tell us about your journey and not only how you got here, but because you were probably not familiar with a lot of the audio space and how you evolved into being a full-time podcast coach with a robust roster, and also give us a little bit about things you've learned, mistakes you've made that you'd like to share on that journey.
Okay, sure. Well, it started in 2014. The year previously, I left a really nice, comfortable inside sales job where I was sitting in a cubicle under fluorescent lights, you know, something you're really excited about getting up and going to do every day. And I got to the point where I knew that I was cut out for more than what I was doing. I just needed to take a minute and figure out what that was. And in 2014, I had a friend that said, hey, I know these nuns that are doing a podcast and I want to gift them custom theme music for Christmas. Could you write it? Now, I'd quit my nice, comfortable corporate job and he was willing to write me a check. I had no idea what podcast theme music for nuns might sound like, but I was very motivated to figure that out and make it work. And that went well. And then that turned into, since I already had a background with a little bit of audio production experience, Sister Maxine was like, hey, since you know how to do this, would you be interested in editing our podcast? And that was nothing that was even on my radar. I downloaded a couple podcasts at that point, and this was back when like you'd still download it to your iPod to listen to it. So I'd listened to a few, but wasn't super into them. But I was like, okay, I'll give this a shot and see what happens. And I absolutely fell in love with podcasting. So that led me to starting my own podcast and then picking up more editing and production clients. And then that evolved into, hey, can you help me start this? Because I don't have any idea what I'm doing and what equipment I need and how to get what's in my head out into the world. So that was kind of how that journey evolved.
And what are some of the things that you learned, speed bumps that you'd like to share to avoid? A lot of times there's people that says, they say, I want to do a podcast. And then they do one episode, they might get 2 or 3 streams. They do a second episode, they get 1 stream, and they suffer from what we call pod fade. Tell us about what you've learned.
So I think to help avoid that, initially, you just have to know that it's a long game, especially if you don't already have the built-in audience. So before you even, invest in any kind of a microphone, I encourage my clients to kind of get clear on 3 things right off the bat. So I call them the 3 Ps. The first one is premise. What is the premise of your show that's going to differentiate you from any other show that might be out there already? The second is purpose. So what is the purpose for you in producing this show, and what's the purpose for your audience? What do you want them to get out of it? And then the third thing is point of view. So what is that unique perspective or experience or worldview that you're going to be bringing to the table as a host? So why are people going to want to listen to you? And I think just getting clear on those 3 things before you just start getting behind a microphone and start talking. Once you've got some plan and some structure, it makes it a lot easier to show up every week or however often you are producing episodes and continuing so that you get past those 6 or 7 so you can actually get some traction and start to grow your audience.
And what's the typical person or atypical person that comes to you and said, Jen, can you coach me through podcasting? You help them with the setup, you help them with getting on Stitcher, SoundCloud. Tell us about that.
Yeah, all of the things. So I call it from launch to legendary. So all of those things that you need, from what microphone do I need? How do I get my podcast to all the places? How do I get guests? What am I going to do for editing and recording? And there are a lot of experts out there that are like, oh, this is the microphone you want. This is exactly how you want to do it. And I feel like my approach is a little more DIY. As having a musician and playing in bands since junior high, you get that very DIY. I'm going to just look at what I've got around me and put it together and see what I can do with tools I've already got before I start investing a bunch of money. So one of the things I like to encourage my clients to think about is, okay, you don't need the $300 microphone. Take that time, and your space is going to have much more impact on your sound quality than your microphone. This is about a $60 USB microphone that I use for most of my episodes when it's just me talking, because it's easy. I plug it in, I press record, and I go. And I think you've really got to think about what makes sense in your workflow and in the time that you actually have to do things. How can we construct this so you're excited to show up every day or however often you do this and put this out in the world and do it in a way that makes sense for you?
And the other thing to note is it's not going to be good when you start.
Oh, it's going to be horrible. I just tell people, make a horrible, horrible podcast. Then you've got your level set. It's kind of like writing that really bad first draft of your book. It's the same thing with a podcast.
Exactly. How can we contact you, Jen?
You can find me at brassybroad.com. I also have a lot of tutorials and resources on my YouTube channel, which is Brassy Broad Jen.
Thanks for joining us, Jen. I really appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
This is Kurt Wallace. Kurt had to leave because he was pulled to Cincinnati for one of his clients. But just last week, he used about a $300 piece of software to build his own radio station online. And Kurt has done a lot of different things. He's really a renaissance man in radio and the audio space, but he pivoted and did things non-radio. For example, he does a phototp.com photo booth. He'll take a photo booth to events. That's one of his revenue streams. He's the family-friendly DJ. He'll go to your events and make sure that all the music is family-friendly. And he does weddings and bat mitzvahs and things like that. So Kurt and I have known each other for 3 decades, and he's pivoted several times in his career because he's been on radio in Atlanta and Cincinnati, Indianapolis. He was the program director of WQME, the Anderson College radio station, until they sold it to the EMF parent company of K-Love about a year ago. And what he did is he built himself a radio station that just debuted last March or about 6 weeks ago. And what he did was there's a guy in New Zealand that built the software, and for about $300, you can take this playlist generator software, use iTunes as your music source, and build a radio station. It took him, he said, about 10 or 15 minutes. I did it too. It took me about 15 minutes. He also has another brand. It's called indiepraise.org, which he will build radio stations for churches and apps and things like that. But he has pivoted so many times in his career that he and I, if we were to print out our resumes, you'd have to clear a whole rainforest. That's just how many times he's had to pivot. And he's an expert at it. But he's a really funny guy too. And I'm sorry we couldn't have him on, but he had to go to Cincinnati. Mommy bloggers. This is a big space, or it could be daddy bloggers, or it could be a blog about smoking cigars or bourbon or whatever it happens to be. Here's a couple of people that have pivoted and found a superpower outside with what they were originally doing and making tons of money at it. The first one is a girl named Joey Fortman. Joey was a radio personality in suburban Chicago, and her husband was pulled to Philadelphia to get a job. And she didn't have a job in Philadelphia. So she started blogging, which turned into video blogging, which turned into product exposure and doing different tutorials on different mommy things and kid things. This was in 2009. She's now in San Francisco doing mornings at a radio station, but she continues her content on realitymoms.rocks. That's her platform. And the thing she's doing is she takes contributors. So if you think you have something to say in the mommy blog space, contact her. She'll use you as a contributor. And she makes 6 figures on this blog alone. Another example, this is Judy and Kate. Judy Diamond and Kate Frenja. I contacted them in 2009 because, well, first of all, I worked with Judy. And second of all, they showed me their video blog where they had a tripod and just a camera and no lighting. It went on for about 13 minutes. It was full of passion, but not well put together. So I helped them clean that up. And we massaged it. We put it on different platforms. And they went on to do a show on Nickelodeon called Mom's Friends Forever on the Nick Mom block at night. I think they call it Nick at Night. And they did a reality show out of St. Louis produced by Cool Fire Media. So if you have a passion for something, put it out there. Who knows where it might go? It might be a hobby. It might be part-time. You might have a full-time job that you don't like, and you can pivot into something like this, and it becomes something huge. Fitness. If you are a fitness person and you have a passion for fitness, there are places you can go to get a personal trainer certificate in 12 weeks. And I know that there's a lot of gyms that are going to be closing. I read that there's going to be dozens of Gold's gyms going away after COVID-19. But still, that's an opportunity for you if you want to be a personal trainer. You get your certificate. You can do small groups. You can do individuals. There's going to be a bigger appetite moving forward after COVID-19 because everybody's inside and gaining 25 pounds in the next 6 to 8 weeks. So think about that if you want to be a personal trainer. Here's a couple of examples that you might want to check out. Keith Hauser runs a world-class, what I would call a boot camp, and he's given free videos of his 60-minute boot camps right now. Usually it's about $12 a class. He has 6 sessions a day and about 400 clients. So do the math on that. He's done very well. And he also trains cadets going into the military for the United States government. They pay him to get these people ready for in the fitness area and in the mental fitness area before they ever go to boot camp. Sharpfitness.net. And this is Julie Install. She has a fit boot camp. She was somebody who did kind of tip her toe into fitness, and it became a full-time thing for her about 4 or 5 years ago. She does small groups, and she also has fitness videos that you can stream right now and follow along in your own home, and she's doing it for free through COVID-19. So I know we're all gaining 4, 5, 10 pounds or more during COVID, but really do yourself a favor and do 2 or 3 sessions of something. There's tons of yoga stuff on YouTube too, as you probably know. Here's another superpower that I discovered, superpowers that I discovered personally about 10 years ago. This is my broadcast resume. Okay, this is the one I was putting out there. Yeah, I've done this, I've done that, pretty cool stuff. I had a lot of success and blah, blah, blah. But it really didn't tell my skills that I had. So I hired a professional resume writer. Her name is Arlene Schwartz. She's out of Cleveland. I've never met her face to face. And she interviewed me, didn't want to see my old resume, didn't even want me to talk about what I'd done in the past. She's just interviewed me for 3 hours and came up with this, a much more robust resume that talks about how I've done union negotiations. I've managed $5 million budgets. I've led over 50 people at a time. I had a network of 15 radio stations, all this stuff that I didn't even know about myself. The fact that I've done partnerships with multi-million-dollar corporations, and it really changed how I present myself as a talent in the resume space. So I encourage you during this downtime, and they can do it virtually, is to hire a professional resume writer. Don't try the templates online because you have a blind spot when it comes to your own personal hidden superpowers. A professional resume writer will pull that out of you. And then finally, you think, well, I'm 58. I might be too old to do something different. And that's not true at all. Here's a list of people who have, later in life, have found success. Stan Lee sold his first Marvel comic when he was just shy of 40. He's toiled and toiled for years and years and years until he found success. Vera Wang was a ice skater and a writer. She entered the fashion world at 40. Samuel L. Jackson got his first big movie break in a Spike Lee film at 46. He had a couple other roles, some off-Broadway stuff, but he really hit it big when he was 46 in the 90s. Julia Child sold her first cookbook at 50. That was even before the show came around. Ray Kroc, he joined McDonald's and did business with McDonald's when he was 53, but bought his first McDonald's when he was 59 in Des Plaines, Illinois. Harlan Sanders, first franchise of KFC at 62. Sam Walton, he toiled around with Benjamin Franklin stores for years and years and years before he was 44 and founded his first Walmart in Benton, Arkansas. Martha Stewart, her first entertaining book was published at 41 before she went into the television space. John Hamm got his first starring role at 36. Everybody knows what that is, right? Mad Men. And Henry Ford was 45 in 1908. Think about that. 45 in 1908 was old before he did his very first Model T coming off the assembly line. As we wrap up, here's what I want to do before you have questions for me or Bill or Jen. Let me ask you a question. Let's go around the room and unmute our microphones. And I want to ask you, what is there something that you have done that nobody on this call knows you've done? Lexi, we're going to start with you.
Well, I have a blog on my website. I do photography on the side. So on my website, I have a blog, and I've written 2 blogs, and then I never wrote another one, but I really liked it. So I guess that's something that no one probably knows about me, maybe.
Excellent. Diane?
Some of you might know this, but most of probably not. I started out when my kids were younger painting murals. I always loved the arts, and I would do it for like our public library and churches and that. And when we moved to Indiana 15 years ago, I had a decorative painting business. So I did walls and murals and things like behind me on the wall, which is like a 7-layer trowel finish. So, and then I kind of pivoted to the marketing and then the chamber world. And I don't know, when you say later in life and you put those ages on there, yikes, I'm running out of time. I need to find my superpower.
What are
No,
you,
you're
30?
not.
Come on.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Thanks for sharing. Jen?
Okay.
There you go.
Okay. I did not start training jujitsu until I turned 48.
Wow.
So
You are
no,
not
no
that
martial arts until 48. Mm-hmm.
Get out.
Wow. That's awesome. Carly?
I was on MasterChef a couple years ago in
Whoa.
in 2013, 2014 season, so like season 6. Ended up being a mom. And so I've kind of dabbled in some food photography, and I am working on my first cookbook, hopefully soon.
Oh, that's awesome. There's some superpowers right there. Shelley?
I was
Hi,
going
I'm
to
Shelly, and
could-
I have recently reinvented myself, taking some of my life experiences, and got a certification through the Mental Health Association to help with individuals as far as mental health issues, and also certification is a recovery coach specialist.
Oh,
So
that's angel work.
I think that
Congratulations.
after this COVID-19, there's going to definitely be a lot of people that need some of the mental health and substance abuse help.
Thank you for sharing. Appreciate it. Valerie?
Sorry, had to unmute. I don't think anybody on this call even knows me. But I escaped corporate America a few years ago and came back to do in Boone County, became a junior master gardener, trained the trainers. So I've been training people all over the state of Indiana to implement junior master gardener programs here in the state.
That's awesome. Beautifying the globe. Thank you.
Exactly.
Lee?
Good morning. I grew up on a farm in Ohio, and so I can drive a tractor, milk a cow. I've walked cows. I've probably done a lot of farm-related things nobody would expect.
Well, that's awesome. Bill, you want to share?
Oh, I don't know if I can share any of mine. Let's
I
see.
told
Something
everybody
somebody
about the
might not-
pickleball thing, so you can't say that.
You want me to talk about pickleball? Yeah, so I play a sport called pickleball. It is apparently the fastest growing sport in America, or so they tell us, so that we feel better about playing a sport called pickleball. And it is, yeah, sort of a hybrid of ping pong and tennis and badminton. And yeah, so I played in a national tournament a couple of years ago in Naples, Florida. It was massive. There were like 2,000 people. But yeah, they say there's like 3 million people that play around the United States. And yeah, it's growing and growing. A lot of former tennis players play. But yeah, it's
Who knows what
fun.
pickleball is? Wait, raise your hand.
Oh, okay, a few. I don't feel so bad now.
Okay. Well, thanks for being on, Bill, and thanks for sharing. Don, how you doing?
Fine, thank you. Fine, you know, my claim to fame probably that nobody knows about around here is growing up high school, college, until I was transferred over here, actually, a few years out of college. I was in a Christian rock band. Ooh. And I'm a drummer, and we produced a couple albums. We probably the biggest claim to fame is we were a finalist in a contest that they had at the Ohio State Fair every year. You know, I'm from Ohio, so
good for you. I didn't know that.
Yeah, had a few groupies. You know, Christian rock artist groupies are a little different, but yeah.
And Don, you'll need to know that well, a lot of people have these fancy light rings for this. I use the thing I got at your store. This thing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they're right there on the front desk at Don's UPS store on Whitestown Parkway.
That's right. Thank you.
Got several of them in closets. You can Velcro them in, and it's quite a bit of light. It makes me look pale, so I don't use it all the time, depending on where the sun's coming in. So don't be offended that I didn't use it on this call.
That's all right. Thanks for the plug.
Denise? Hello.
Well, I was thinking about your resume writer story, and you took it a different direction, but it also could be a second career superpower. So, because for me personally, because I've have a lot of years in recruiting and reviewed a lot of resumes and written a few for my clients. So just something to think about for the future.
Thanks for sharing. And Katie?
Hi. Well, I haven't done it lately, but when I was in high school, I was very involved in like drama club and theater and musicals and stuff. So ideally, I'd want to get back into that at some point.
Thanks for being on. Thanks for sharing. And I guess I can say this because in the practice yesterday, I told Diane and Lexi this, but when I was 19, I auditioned for a singer and dancer on a cruise ship on the Butler campus at Clues Hall and didn't get it. So I wasn't that disappointed, but that would have been a superpower, I guess. You know, I was in Royal Airs. I mean, come on. We were like Glee back in the day. We had velour suits and stuff. I mean, we were the thing. Hey, thanks for being on. If you have any questions for me, we're running about on time. You can ask now, or my contact information is up there. If you need any help on any of the things we discussed, I did have a module on art and painting. The Bob Ross series, the complete Bob Ross series, by the way, is on Netflix right now. And I also had one on, what was the other one I had on? I just didn't think we had time. So, oh, music. Music was the other one. That this is a great time to learn an instrument, either piano or guitar. You know, as Kent said, when you play guitar, you just pick up the guitar and you start playing. And Jen knows that. She's been playing guitar for decades. So thanks for being on. Thank you, Diane. Thank you, Lexi, for putting this together. Any questions? Are we good?
I may have a stupid or personal question for Jen.
No question is stupid, Lex.
I don't know which it is, but how do people make money being a podcaster? I mean, obviously they do, but I don't know how.
You can do that through getting sponsorships for your show. A lot of the clients that I work with, since they are business owners, they are typically using their podcast to promote their own expertise. So rather than go out and try to find a sponsor and try to sell somebody else's stuff, a lot of times they will use that as a vehicle to kind of maybe highlight and sponsor some of the own courses or products or services that they offer. Because it just makes more sense for them to talk about what they do rather than drop in a sponsor from another mattress company.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You could do that for the for the chamber and our members.
I know. I'm gonna make a podcast.
Don't give her ideas to use all her superheroes somewhere else.
Lexi, Jen is spot on. It's an extension of your brand. If you are a standalone podcaster and starting out without a fan base, only about 2% of the podcasts standalone in America make money. You're going to lose money if you want to go in that space. But as Jen said, it has a long tail, and you need to be in it for the long game. And you know, you just, if you have a passion for something, put it out there. You might find a following. You know, just don't eat food. Don't do that.
I won't. Don't worry. I don't want anyone watching me eat chicken wings for breakfast.
Well, thanks for your time. Diane, do you have any closing remarks?
Yes. First of all, thank you, Kevin. I think that's probably everything we needed on a Friday. You know, during these times, it is time to reflect, and we most certainly want that to be positive reflection. And I think this is the great start for 2 webinars that we're hosting next week. You have between now and Wednesday to draft some I will statements. And so, you know, I appreciate you, you know, sharing. Jen, thank you for being on here, and Kent and Bill. Hearing inspirational stories really does make us all think, you know, where are we now? Where do we want to be? Maybe it's in our roles that we're currently in. Maybe it's something on the side, or maybe that's something that we've always had a dream to do. I know, I don't know if your speakers, you know, had some fears. I think everybody probably, you know, there's some fear in taking that leap when you have a passion. I'm one that kind of really likes stability, and I like to take chances, but only little chances. So, you know, I know it takes a leap of faith, you know, to really take a deep dive, but I think we all realize that, you know, life is short too. And so now is the time that, you know, we can create, even expanding what we're doing now, or doing something, you know, new or fun, even on a personal level. So I appreciate everybody taking the time to be on here today, and I encourage you to join in on Wednesday. You know, if our even presenters today want to join in on Wednesday, and, you know, even share in kind of how they came up with their I will statements. There's plenty of talk to continue this. Does anybody else have any questions? Well, thank you so much. Enjoy your Friday and have a great weekend. And we look forward to seeing you next week.
Thanks.
Thanks, Kevin.